Some wounds never heal, especially when they take your child from you. Garrett Hollis stood at the kitchen counter of his apartment, hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug, watching steam rise in the early morning light. Outside, the city of Columbus was waking up. Delivery trucks rumbled past on the street below. A dog barked somewhere down the block. The distant hiss of a bus pulled away from the curb, carrying people to jobs and lives that probably made sense to them. He had lived in this place for 8 years now. Small, furnished with mismatched furniture he had picked up at thrift stores or found abandoned on curbs. Nothing fancy, nothing that felt like home. Just 4 walls and a ceiling that kept the rain out and gave him somewhere to sleep between jobs. At 52 years old, Garrett was a man built for physical work. His shoulders still carried the breadth of someone who had spent decades lifting, carrying, and fixing things other people could not fix themselves. His hands were calloused, scarred in places where tools had slipped or materials had bitten back. Gray touched his temples now and threaded through the stubble on his jaw. His eyes, a faded blue like winter sky, held the kind of quiet that comes from years of keeping thoughts to yourself. The red toolbox sat on the table behind him. He had pulled it out last night after the letter arrived. Just looking at it made something tighten in his chest. The metal was dented and scratched with the initials WH stamped on the side in faded black letters. Walter Hollis. His father had given it to him when Garrett was 15 years old. Handed it over without ceremony or explanation. "You will need this," his father had said. That was it. No life lessons. No heartfelt speech. Just the toolbox and the assumption that Garrett would figure out the rest on his own. He had carried that toolbox through every job, every apartment, every version of his life. Inside were the tools his father had used and the ones Garrett had added over the years. Wrenches, screwdrivers, a hammer with a worn wooden handle. Everything he needed to fix things. Everything except what was broken in his own life. Garrett took another sip of coffee and turned to face the envelope on the counter. White. Official looking. Return address from a law firm he had never heard of. Morrison and Associates out of some rural county in Pennsylvania, 3 states away. He had opened it last night, read it twice, then set it down and stared at the wall until midnight, his mind churning through memories he had spent a decade trying to bury. His father was dead. The words sat heavy in his mind like stones at the bottom of a well. Walter Hollis, 78 years old, passed away in his sleep 2 weeks ago. Garrett had not known. They had not spoken in over a decade. Not since the custody hearing. Not since the day Garrett's whole world collapsed, and his father had stood in the back of the courtroom, silent as stone, and then walked out without a single word. The letter said Walter had left him something. An inheritance, not money. Garrett's father had never had much of that, at least none that Garrett knew about. But property, a piece of land, and whatever was on it. The lawyer's letter was vague on details. Just an address and a request that Garrett come in person to sign papers and take possession. He picked up the letter again and read the address one more time. Millbrook Springs, Pennsylvania. Population barely 2,000. Middle of nowhere. He had never heard his father mention it. But then, his father had never been one for long conversations about anything. Walter Hollis had spent 40 years working merchant marine vessels. gone for months at a time, returning with sun-weathered skin and stories he never quite told. Garrett's mother had died when he was 12, a car accident on a rainy night that had left him suddenly and completely alone with a father who did not know how to be present, even when he was physically there. After that, it was just the two of them in a small house near the docks in Norfolk. Walter would leave for voyages and young Garrett would stay with neighbors or, when he got older, by himself. They had existed in parallel lives, occasionally intersecting for a week or two between ships, never quite connecting. Garrett had loved his father in that distant, aching way you love someone who is never quite there. He had spent his childhood waiting for Walter to come home, and his teenage years resenting him for leaving, and his adult life trying to understand why his father seemed incapable of showing affection in any form other than silence. Now, Walter was gone, and he had left behind a piece of land in a town Garrett had never heard of. He walked to the window and looked down at the street below. A woman pushed a stroller past a fire hydrant. An old man sat on a bench reading a newspaper, turning pages slowly in the morning light. Normal people doing normal things, living lives that made sense. Garrett used to be normal once. He used to have a family. The memories always started the same way. With her, Elise. Dark hair that caught the sunlight like something from a painting. A laugh that made him feel like everything might actually turn out okay. They had met when Garrett was 28 at a bar in Richmond, where he had stopped for a drink after finishing a job. She had been sitting alone reading a book, and something about the way she smiled when he asked what she was reading made him feel like he had known her his whole life. They married a year later. Small ceremony. Just a few friends. Her parents had not attended. Elise Kincaid came from money. Old money. The kind that came with expectations and control and a very specific idea of what their daughter's life was supposed to look like. Garrett did not fully understand any of that until he met her parents, Margot and Donald Kincaid. They lived in a massive house in an expensive suburb of Philadelphia. Antique furniture, oil paintings on the walls, a housekeeper who wore a uniform and called everyone sir or ma'am. They had not approved of Garrett, not from the first moment they laid eyes on him. He was a handyman, a blue-collar worker with no college degree and no prospects beyond fixing other people's problems. He did not golf. He did not belong to country clubs. He did not have a trust fund or a family name that meant anything to anyone. But Elise had loved him anyway, and that had been enough. For a while. Nora was born 2 years into their marriage, a tiny thing with Elise's dark hair and Garrett's stubborn chin. He had held her in this hospital delivery room and felt something shift inside him, like the whole world had suddenly reorganized itself around this small, breathing person in his arms. They had been happy, not perfect. No family ever is, but happy in the way that matters. Garrett worked hard, came home tired, and Elise managed their little house with Nora toddling behind her, asking endless questions about everything she saw. They had routines. Pancakes on Sunday mornings, evening walks when the weather was nice, bedtime stories that Garrett made up on the spot because he could never remember how the real ones went. The kind of life that does not seem special until it is gone. Then Elise got sick. It happened slowly at first. She complained of being tired all the time, headaches that would not go away, nausea that came and went without explanation. Garrett took her to doctors who ran tests but could not find anything definitive. They talked about stress and suggested she rest more. They prescribed vitamins and told her to eat better. She seemed to improve for a while, then got worse again. The pattern repeated itself over and over. Good weeks followed by bad weeks. Energy followed by exhaustion. Hope followed by fear. Garrett remembered the morning he found her collapsed on the bathroom floor. Nora had been at school. He had come home early from a job because he had a feeling, one of those gut instincts you cannot explain but know better than to ignore. He had called her name when he walked through the front door. No answer. Called again. Silence. He found her lying on the cold tile, unconscious, barely breathing. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and shouted medical terms he did not understand. The hospital was a maze of white corridors and worried faces. The doctors spoke in careful, measured tones that told him nothing and everything at the same time. She died 3 days later. Brain hemorrhage, they said. Rare. Unpredictable. Nothing anyone could have done. Nora was 6 years old. Garrett had barely processed the funeral when Margot and Donald Kincaid appeared. Not to grieve with him, not to help with Nora, not to offer comfort or support or any of the things normal grandparents might do when their daughter dies and leaves behind a child. They came to take her. Margot Kincaid stood in his living room like she owned it, tall and elegant with silver hair and cold eyes that assessed everything they looked at, including Garrett, and found it all lacking. Donald stood beside her, silent and gray, a man who had clearly spent decades doing whatever his wife told him to do. "You cannot care for her properly," Margot had said. Her voice was calm and certain, the voice of someone who was not asking, but informing. "You work all day. You can barely support yourself. Nora needs stability. She needs family. I am her family," Garrett had said. "I am her father, and we are her grandparents. We have the means to give her everything she needs. You have nothing." The custody battle was swift and brutal. The Kincaids hired expensive lawyers who painted Garrett as negligent, unstable, potentially dangerous. They brought witnesses who testified he had been absent, that Elise had managed everything alone, that he had failed as a husband and would fail as a father. One witness in particular destroyed him, Ruth Brennan, a woman from their old neighborhood. She testified that she had seen Garrett yelling at Elise, screaming at her in the driveway of their home. She described it in vivid detail. The rage on his face, the fear in Elise's eyes, the way Elise had flinched when he raised his hand. Garrett barely remembered the incident she was describing. A fight about money, probably. Stress making both of them sharp and short-tempered. But in that courtroom it sounded like abuse. The judge was an older man named William Porter, thin lips and cold eyes that seemed to have made up his mind before the first witness took the stand. He listened to the testimony with an expression of barely concealed contempt, and when all the evidence had been presented, he ruled in favor of the grandparents. Supervised visitation only. Pending further review. Garrett had tried to fight. He had shown up for every scheduled visit, brought toys and books, and tried everything he could think of to make Nora smile. But Margot was always there, watching, taking notes, making sure Garrett knew he was being observed and judged and found wanting. After 3 months, Margot filed a motion claiming Garrett was disruptive and confusing the child, that his presence was causing Nora emotional distress, that for the sake of her well-being, the visits should stop entirely. The judge agreed. His lawyer said they could appeal, but it would take money Garrett did not have. The Kincaids had bottomless resources. They could drag the case out for years, burying Garrett in legal fees until he had nothing left. And there was something else. Something that broke him more than any court ruling ever could. Every time he visited Nora, she cried. Not because she wanted to stay with him, but because she did not understand why he could not take her home. She would wrap her small arms around his neck and sob when it was time for him to leave, and Garrett would have to peel her off him and hand her to Margot, while his heart shattered into pieces too small to ever put back together. So he stopped fighting, not because he did not love Nora, not because he had given up hope, but because every visit felt like tearing a wound open again and again. Because he was exhausted and broken and did not know how to fight people who had that much power and that much money and that much determination to take everything from him. He moved to Ohio, took whatever work he could find, and tried to build something resembling a life out of the wreckage. That was 10 years ago. Nora would be 16 now. He wondered if she remembered him. Probably not. Or if she did, it was the version Margot had created. The father who abandoned her. The man who was not strong enough to fight for his own child. The thought made his chest ache in a way that never really went away. Garrett looked back at the red toolbox on the table, at the letter beside it, at the address in Pennsylvania, where his father had apparently left him something worth having. He thought about his father standing in the back of that courtroom 10 years ago, silent, watching, then walking out without a word. For a decade, Garrett had believed that silence meant his father did not care, that Walter had looked at the situation and decided it was not worth getting involved, not worth fighting for his own granddaughter. Now Walter was dead, and he had left Garrett an inheritance. Part of him wanted to ignore it, sell the land sight unseen, take whatever money it brought and move on, keep his head down, keep surviving, keep pretending that the life he had built in this cramped apartment with this dead-end career was enough. But another part of him, a part he thought he had buried 10 years ago, wanted to know. Wanted to understand why his father had stayed silent. Wanted to find out what Walter had been doing all these years. Wanted more than anything to understand what that inheritance actually meant. Garrett went to the bedroom and pulled a duffel bag from the closet. He packed light. A few changes of clothes, toiletries, the letter from the lawyer. He hesitated, then grabbed the framed photo from his nightstand. Nora at 4 years old, sitting on his shoulders, laughing at something off camera. Elise had taken that picture at a park near their house. One of the last good days before everything fell apart. He wrapped the frame in a shirt and tucked it carefully into the bag. Back in the kitchen, he picked up the red toolbox. Solid, heavy, familiar. If there was a structure on this property his father had left him, it probably needed work. and if Garrett knew anything in this world, it was how to work. He locked the apartment, walked down 3 flights of stairs, and stepped out into the morning. His truck was parked at the curb. An old Ford, more rust than paint, but it ran. He tossed the bag and toolbox in the back, climbed into the cab, and sat there for a moment looking at the city streets stretching out before him. People moved through their days all around him, living their lives, making plans, going places that mattered to them. Garrett had been one of them for a long time now. Anonymous, safe, small. But something was pulling him away from all of it. Maybe it was the property. Maybe it was curiosity about what his father had left behind. Maybe it was the faint, desperate hope that somewhere in all of this there was an answer to the question that had haunted him for 10 long years. What really happened? He started the engine, pulled away from the curb, and headed for the highway. The drive took 6 hours. Garrett watched the landscape change through the windshield as Ohio fell away behind him. Urban sprawl gave way to suburbs. Suburbs gave way to farmland. Farmland gave way to forests and hills and small towns that appeared and vanished before he could catch their names. The radio played old country songs and static-filled news reports. He stopped once for gas and bad coffee at a truck stop, where the waitress called him honey and asked where he was headed. Nowhere special. He told her, just taking care of some family business. She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. By late afternoon, he saw the sign. Millbrook Springs. Population 1,847. Welcome. The town was exactly what he had imagined. A main street with a handful of shops. A diner with a weathered sign. A post office. A bar. A gas station that looked like it had not been updated since the 80s. People moved slowly here. An old man on a porch. A woman sweeping the sidewalk in front of a hardware store. They watched his truck pass with the mild interest small towns reserve for strangers. Garrett followed the directions the lawyer had given him. Past the main street, down a 2-lane road that curved through farmland dotted with silos and barns, past a rusted mailbox, a stand of oak trees, a gate that hung half open from a broken hinge. Then he saw it. His foot came off the gas pedal. The truck slowed to a crawl and then stopped entirely in the middle of the dirt road. The property was at the end of a long driveway surrounded by overgrown grass and tangled bushes that had not been tended in years. And in the center of it all, impossibly, unbelievably, was a ship. Not a small boat. A ship. Massive. Rusting. Tilted slightly to one side like a drunk leaning against a wall. The hull was covered in patches of brown and orange decay, and vegetation had grown up around it, like the earth itself was trying to reclaim the vessel and drag it down into the soil. The deck was littered with debris. The cabin structure rose from the ship's center like a forgotten monument to something that no longer existed. Garrett stared through the windshield, and something cracked open inside his chest. His father's ship. He had seen it once as a kid. Walter had taken him aboard when it was docked in Norfolk, shown him the captain's quarters, let him spin the big wooden wheel. Garrett had been maybe 10 years old, awestruck by the size of it, by the idea that his father commanded something so enormous across oceans he could barely imagine. Now it sat here, miles from any water, half buried in a Pennsylvania field, a monument to a life Garrett had never really understood. He got out of the truck slowly and walked toward it. Up close, the ship was even more overwhelming. Rust streaked down from the railings like dried tears. Windows were cracked or missing entirely. A gangway had been rigged up from the ground to a gap in the hull, weathered wood planks that creaked ominously as Garrett tested them with his weight. He climbed aboard. The deck groaned under his feet. Everything smelled like rust and rot and something faintly sweet, like old wood slowly returning to the earth. He walked carefully, testing each step until he reached the door to the main cabin. It was unlocked. Inside, the air was stale but dry, surprisingly dry for a structure that had been sitting in a field for God knows how long. The captain's quarters were intact. A desk, a chair, a narrow bed bolted to the wall, shelves lined with books and nautical charts. Everything organized with military precision the way Walter had always kept his things. On the desk in the center was an envelope with his name on it. Garrett picked it up. His hands were shaking slightly, though he could not have said why. The handwriting on the front was his father's, blocky, precise, unmistakable. He opened the envelope. Inside was a single key and a folded piece of paper. He unfolded the paper and read the words his father had written. Garrett, everything you need is here. I am sorry I could not do more when it mattered, but I never stopped trying. The truth is in this ship. Find it. Use it. Bring Nora home. Dad. Garrett stood there, holding the note, reading those words over and over. Everything you need is here. The truth is in this ship. Bring Nora home. His father had known about Nora, had been thinking about her, had apparently been doing something about the situation for years, working in secret, preparing something Garrett did not yet understand. He looked around the cabin, at the shelves and the desk and the shadows in the corners. Somewhere in this ship, his father had hidden evidence, answers, the truth about what had really happened. But what truth, what had Walter discovered that Garrett did not already know? The desk had 3 drawers. The top one held pens, pencils, a ruler. The second contained papers, old receipts, insurance documents, nothing significant. The third drawer was locked. Garrett tried the key from the envelope. It did not fit. He studied the lock for a moment, then went back to his truck for the toolbox. Inside, he found a small tension wrench and a pick. Skills from a misspent youth back when he and his friends thought breaking into abandoned buildings counted as adventure. He worked the lock carefully, feeling for the pins, listening for the click. After a few minutes, the mechanism gave way. The drawer slid open. Inside was a leather-bound book, a ship's logbook, the kind captains were required to keep documenting voyages and weather conditions and everything that happened aboard their vessel. Garrett lifted it out carefully. The cover was worn smooth from years of handling. The pages inside were yellowed and stiff with age. He opened it to the first entry. The date made him pause. It was from 12 years ago, right around the time Elise had gotten sick. He flipped through, slowly scanning his father's handwriting. Dates, times, weather conditions, course headings. Standard maritime documentation. But then, about halfway through, the entries changed. They became longer, more detailed. And they were not about the ship anymore. They were about Margot and Donald Kincaid. Garrett's hands tightened on the book. He sat down in his father's chair and began to read. September 12th. Received another call from Margot Kincaid today. She asked about Garrett's work schedule, whether he is home with Nora regularly. I told her it is none of her business. She said it would become her business soon enough. Hung up on her. September 19th. Margot called again. This time she was more direct. Said she has been watching Garrett and Elise, taking notes. Said Elise is struggling and that Garrett is not equipped to handle the situation. I asked what situation. She would not say. Just kept talking about Nora's welfare. I told her to leave my son alone. October 3rd. Elise called me today. First time in months. She sounded scared. Said her mother has been showing up at the house unannounced, bringing doctors, insisting Elise needs help. Elise says she feels fine most days, just tired. I asked if Garrett knows. She said she does not want to worry him. I told her to document everything. Keep a record of what Margot says and does, just in case. Garrett's breath caught in his throat. Elise had called his father. She had been scared. And Garrett had never known. He kept reading. October 10th. Margot Kincaid left a voicemail. Did not call back. The message was clear enough. She is preparing something. I have started making my own documentation. Called a lawyer friend. Asked about grandparents' rights in custody cases. Did not like what I heard. October 15th. Elise is gone. Garrett called barely coherent. Brain hemorrhage. I'm heading back to port early. Should arrive in 3 days. God help us all. October 18th. Made it to the hospital. Too late. Elise has already been buried. The Kincaids arranged everything. Did not wait for Garrett to make decisions. Margot looked at me during the service like she had already won something. Donald just stood there. Empty. November 2nd. The Kincaids filed for custody. I knew it was coming. Talked to Garrett. Tried to convince him to fight harder. But he is destroyed. Cannot blame him. I have hired a private investigator to look into Margot's background. Something is not right about Elise's death. Garrett stopped reading. His vision had blurred. He set the logbook down and pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to breathe through the tightness in his chest. His father had known, had seen it coming, had tried to help even when Garrett thought he had walked away. After a moment, he picked up the logbook again. November 14th. I found something. Margot's first husband died 23 years ago. Fell down the stairs at their home. Ruled accidental. But there were inconsistencies in the police report. Witnesses who were never interviewed. Margot inherited everything. Nobody questioned it because she came from money anyway. November 20th. Attended the custody hearing. Sat in the back. Wanted to testify about Margot's threats. But Garrett's lawyer said it would seem biased. Angry father defending his son. Would not help. The Kincaids' lawyers were good. Professional. They made Garrett look like a failure. Ruth Brennan testified against him. Said she saw him yelling at Elise, Ruth looked terrified the whole time, like someone had a gun to her back. November 21st. They took Nora. Judge ruled for supervised visitation only. I watched Garrett fall apart. Wanted to say something, anything. But what good are words now? I failed him. Failed Elise. Failed Nora. But I am not done yet. December 1st. P. I confirmed suspicions about Ruth Brennan. The Kincaids paid off her mortgage 2 weeks before the hearing. $30,000. Transferred directly from Donald Kincaid's account to her bank. Ruth testified because she had no choice. They bought her house to control her testimony. Garrett read that passage 3 times. Ruth Brennan, the woman whose testimony had destroyed him in court, the woman who had described him as abusive and dangerous. She had been paid, bribed, bought, and his father had found proof. He kept reading faster now, flipping through pages filled with his father's cramped handwriting. More evidence, more documentation, more pieces of a puzzle Garrett had never known existed. December 15th. Collected evidence. Photos. Financial records. Recorded phone calls. Everything I could find. Took it to a lawyer. He said it is compelling but would need to be presented carefully. Any misstep and the Kincaids' lawyers would bury us. He advised waiting. Build in a stronger case. January 8th. Garrett stopped returning my calls. Cannot blame him. I stood silent in that courtroom. He thinks I did not care. Maybe it is better that way for now. He needs to survive this, not carry my failures too. January 20th. Margot called me directly. How she got my number, I do not know. She said if I interfere, she will make sure Garrett never sees Nora again. Not visits. Not photos. Nothing. She has judges, lawyers, people who owe her favors. I believe her. So I am doing this differently now, documenting everything, building a case that cannot be buried or ignored. When the time is right, Garrett will have what he needs. The entries continued for months, then years. Walter Hollis had spent a decade collecting evidence, phone records showing Margot's threatening calls, financial documents proving the bribes to Ruth Brennan and others, medical records he had somehow obtained showing Elise had visited multiple doctors in the weeks before her death, with symptoms no one could explain, witness statements from people who knew the Kincaids and had their own stories of intimidation and control. All of it carefully logged and cross-referenced. All of it waiting here in this ship in the middle of nowhere. The final entry was dated 3 months ago. I am dying. Doctor says 6 months. Maybe less. Cancer. Spent my whole life on ships, and it is my own body that sinks me. I have transferred the property to Garrett in my will. The ship is here in Millbrook Springs. On land I bought 15 years ago for this exact purpose. Everything is hidden in these walls. Evidence, documents, recordings. I have left him a map, a trail to follow. He will understand when he is ready. I could not save Elise. I could not stop the Kincaids then. But maybe even now I can give Garrett a chance to make things right, to get his daughter back. Tell him I am sorry I was not stronger. Tell him I never stopped fighting even when he couldn't see it. Well, He will read this himself. Garrett, if you are reading this, you deserved better from me, from all of us. But you still have time. Do not waste it. The truth is in this ship. Find it. Use it. Bring Nora home. Garrett closed the logbook slowly. His hands were shaking. His throat felt tight, like something was pressing against it from the inside. His father had known everything, had been fighting the whole time, quietly, in the background, while Garrett fell apart and gave up and ran away to Ohio to hide from his own pain. And now, Walter was gone, leaving only this, a ship full of secrets, a decade's worth of evidence against the people who had destroyed Garrett's life. He stood up and walked to the porthole, looked out at the overgrown field. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the grass, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere out there, 3 states away, Nora was living with people who had lied and bribed and possibly killed to keep control of her. His daughter, his little girl, 16 years old now and probably convinced her father had abandoned her. Garrett that had spent 10 years in survival mode, working, sleeping, avoiding anything that hurt too much to think about. He had let the Kincaids win because fighting them felt impossible, because he did not have money or power or connections, because he was just a handyman with a broken heart and nothing to offer except love that nobody seemed to think was enough. But his father had built him a weapon. Now he just had to figure out how to use it. The next morning, Garrett drove into town for breakfast. He parked in front of a diner called Ruth's Place. The sign was weathered, the paint fading, but the lights were on inside, and he could see people moving behind the windows. He pushed through the door and took a seat at the counter, ordering coffee and eggs from a waitress who looked too young to be working this early. While he waited, he studied the room. Farmers in work clothes, a couple of old-timers playing chess in a corner booth, a woman reading a newspaper, while her toddler colored in a book beside her. Normal life, normal people. The kitchen door swung open and an older woman emerged carrying a pot of coffee. She was in her 60s with gray-streaked hair, pulled back in a loose bun, and tired eyes that had clearly seen more than their share of hard years. She wore an apron over a simple dress and moved with the efficiency of someone who had been doing this job for decades. She walked along the counter refilling cups, exchanging a few words with the regulars. Then she reached Garrett and stopped. Her face changed. Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition. Then something more complicated. Fear, maybe. Or guilt. She set the coffee pot down and stared at him. "You are Walter's son." It was not a question. Garrett nodded. "I am. I thought so." She swallowed hard. "You look just like him. Same eyes." Garrett studied her face. The name of the diner, Ruth's Place. And suddenly, he understood. "You are Ruth Brennan, the woman who had testified against him in court, the woman who had described him as dangerous and abusive, the woman whose 30 pieces of silver had cost him his daughter." She did not deny it. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I am Ruth Brennan." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sounds of the diner continued around them. Forks scraping plates. Quiet conversation. The hiss of bacon on the grill. Garrett did not know what to say. Part of him wanted to stand up and walk out. Avoid this conversation entirely. What good would it do to confront her now, 10 years after the fact? But another part of him, the part that had spent all night reading his father's logbook, needed to hear what she had to say. Ruth glanced around the diner, checking to see who might be listening. "Not here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She pulled a pen from her apron and scribbled something on a napkin. "Come to my house tonight, 7 o'clock. She slid the napkin across the counter. "I will tell you everything." Before Garrett could respond, she picked up the coffee pot and walked away. He looked down at the address she had written. Ruth Brennan wanted to talk, but not in public. That meant she was scared. Of what? Of the Kincaids. Even here, 3 states away. Their reach was that long his food arrived. He ate mechanically, tasting nothing. Ruth did not come back to his table. When he finished, he left cash on the counter and walked out into the morning light. Back at the ship, Garrett continued his search. He went through the captain's quarters systematically, checking behind every book on the shelves opening, every drawer, tapping on walls and floors, listening for hollow spaces. His father had said everything was hidden here. A trail to follow. Garrett intended to find every piece of it. In a closet behind a false panel, he found a wooden box. Inside were financial records, bank statements showing payments from Donald Kincaid's accounts to various people, not just Ruth Brennan, a court clerk, a social worker who had evaluated Garrett's home. Small amounts, nothing that would raise immediate red flags, but a pattern nonetheless. The Kincaids had bought testimony, piece by piece, person by person. Garrett photographed everything with his phone, made notes, cataloged each document and where he had found it. Then he noticed the floorboards. In the galley near the old stove, one section of the floor did not quite match the rest. Slightly different wood grain, newer nails. He grabbed a pry bar from his toolbox and worked carefully, not wanting to damage anything that might be important. The board came up easier than expected. Underneath, wrapped in oilcloth, was a small wooden box. His hands trembled as he unwrapped it. Inside were letters, old, folded carefully, the paper yellowed and stiff. He opened the first one and saw handwriting he recognized immediately. Elise, his wife, had written to his father. In secret, in the weeks before she died. "Dear Walter," the letter began. "I know we have not always been close, but I need to talk to someone and Garrett cannot know yet. He has enough to worry about." Garrett's vision blurred. He blinked hard and forced himself to keep reading. "My parents have been visiting more often, Mom especially. She brings doctors, insists I need examinations, says I am not well. But Walter, I feel fine most days, just tired. Garrett works so hard, and I do not want him to think I am complaining. Mom says I am being stubborn, that I do not recognize how sick I am, but I think she is the one who is sick with control. She wants Nora away from us, and I can see it in how she talks, how she looks at me, like I am failing at being her daughter. And Nora deserves better." Garrett's chest ached. Elise had felt it, had seen what was coming. There were more letters, each one revealing a little more. Elise writing about feeling watched, about finding her mother in their house when they were not home, about conversations where Margot would hint that maybe Nora should come stay with her grandparents for a while, just until things settled down, just until you were feeling better. Elise describing symptoms that came and went without explanation: nausea, headaches, confusion, symptoms that appeared after she ate at her parents' house and faded when she stayed home. And then the last letter, dated 3 days before she died. Walter, I am scared. I think Mom has been putting something in my food. I know it sounds crazy, but the symptoms only happen after I eat at their house. I have been keeping track. I have photographs of pills in her medicine cabinet, pills I do not recognize. I'm going to go to the police after Nora's birthday. I have to wait until then. If I do it now, Mom will find a way to take Nora during the investigation. I need to be careful. I need to protect my daughter. Please, do not tell Garrett yet. I need to handle this myself. If anything happens to me, make sure he knows I loved him. Make sure Nora knows too. Garrett set the letter down. At the bottom of the box was one more item, a small velvet pouch. He opened it. A ring fell into his palm. Elise's wedding ring. Simple gold band worn smooth from years of wear. She had taken it off and sent it to Walter for safekeeping, just in case she did not survive. Garrett closed his fist around the ring and sat there on the galley floor, surrounded by evidence of a crime no one had investigated, holding the last piece of his wife he would ever touch. Elise had known. She had figured out what her mother was doing, and she had died 3 days later, before she could go to the police, before she could protect Nora, before she could tell Garrett the truth. The sun went down. The ship grew dark around him, and Garrett sat there in the shadows holding his wife's ring, feeling something he had not felt in years. Not grief. He had lived with grief for so long it had become part of him. This was different. This was rage. At 7 o'clock, he drove to Ruth Brennan's house. She lived on a quiet street at the edge of town. Small place. Neat. Flower boxes in the windows and a porch light that clicked on as he pulled up. He sat in the truck for a moment, watching the house, wondering what he was walking into. The front door opened before he reached it. Ruth stood there, still in her work clothes, looking smaller somehow outside the diner. Diminished. "Come in," she said. The living room was comfortable. Worn furniture. Family photos on the walls. The smell of something baking. Ruth gestured to the couch and Garrett sat. She took the chair across from him, hands folded in her lap. "I have been waiting 10 years to have this conversation," she said. "Your father told me you would come eventually. I just did not know when. Tell me about the testimony. Tell me why you lied." Ruth took a deep breath. "I did not lie exactly. I did see you and Elise arguing that day. I did hear raised voices. But it was not what they made it sound like in court. It was a normal fight. The kind every couple has. You were not threatening her. You were not violent. You were just two stressed people trying to figure out how to pay bills and raise a kid. Then why make it sound like abuse? Because Margot Kincaid told me to." Ruth's voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly. She came to my house 6 weeks before the hearing, said she knew I was behind on my mortgage, that the bank was about to foreclose. She had all the details, how much I owed, when the payments were due. I do not know how she got that information, but she had it. Then she made me an offer. Testify about what I had seen. Make it clear you had a temper. And she would pay off my mortgage, $30,000. And you agreed. I had 2 kids at home. I was going to lose my house. Ruth looked at him directly. I am not proud of it. I am not asking for forgiveness. But that is the truth. Margot Kincaid bought my testimony. And I let her. Because I was desperate. Garrett felt anger rising in his chest. But under it was something else. Understanding. Ruth had been trapped. Same as him. Different kind of trap. But Margot had known exactly which buttons to push. Your father figured it out. Ruth continued. He came into the diner about a year after the hearing, sat down, ordered coffee, and said he knew what I had done. I nearly had a heart attack, but he was not there to threaten me. He said he was building a case, collecting evidence, and he wanted me to know that when the time came, I would need to tell the truth, the real truth. What did you say? I said yes. I told him everything. The meeting with Margot, the money, all of it. He recorded the conversation. I signed an affidavit. It is somewhere on that ship, I am guessing. It is, Garrett said. I found the financial records, the payment from Donald Kincaid's account to your bank. Ruth nodded. Donald probably did not even know what it was for. Margot handles everything. He just signs checks and does what she tells him. She paused. There is something else you should know. Margot Kincaid is not just controlling. She is dangerous. 3 years ago, a man in town started asking questions about the Kincaid family. He was a journalist, working on some story about influential families in the region. He interviewed people, looked at public records. Then one day he left town suddenly. His car was found abandoned 2 states over. He never finished his story, never came back. You think Margot had something to do with it? I do not know. But I know people stopped asking questions after that. Garrett looked at the woman who had helped destroy his life and saw not an enemy but a victim, another person Margot Kincaid had used and discarded. Your father asked me to keep watching, Ruth said, to document anything I saw when the Kincaids came to town. They have a vacation house here, about 15 miles outside Millbrook Springs. They visit twice a year. I have notes, photographs, everything he asked for. She handed him a folder. Inside were pages of observations, dates, times, people Margot met with, conversations overheard in the diner. Help me now, Garrett said. Help me get Nora back. That is how you make it right. Ruth nodded slowly. I will. Whatever you need. Garrett drove back to the ship as night settled over the fields. The vessel loomed in the darkness, massive and silent, a monument to secrets that were finally coming to light. He parked and climbed aboard, his mind racing with everything he had learned. His father had known, had been fighting, had left behind everything Garrett needed to expose the truth. But there was still more to find. More evidence hidden somewhere in these walls. The logbook mentioned photographs, a smoking gun, something hidden where only Garrett would think to look. He stood on the deck under the stars and tried to think like his father. Where would Walter hide something that important? Somewhere only Garrett would find it. Then it hit him. When he was 10 years old, visiting the ship with his father, Garrett had a favorite hiding spot, the navigation room. He used to sit there for hours, spinning the big wooden wheel, pretending he was captain of his own vessel, sailing across endless oceans. If Walter wanted to hide something where only his son would find it, that was where it would be. Garrett headed below deck, found the navigation room. It was smaller than he remembered, but the wheel was still there, mounted on a pedestal in the center. The spokes were hollow metal tubes. He had hidden things in those spokes as a child. Treasures, notes, secrets. He knelt down and shone his flashlight into one of the hollow tubes. Something was inside. He reached in carefully, felt paper, pulled out an envelope. Inside were photographs, Polaroids, dated and labeled in his father's handwriting. The first showed Margot and Donald Kincaid sitting at a restaurant table with a man in a suit. Garrett studied the face, recognized it. Judge William Porter, the judge who had ruled on his custody case. The date on the photo was 4 months before the hearing. The second photo showed the same 3 people at what looked like a private club, drinks in hand, laughing together. 2 months before the hearing. The third showed just Margot and the judge, close together, his hand on her arm. 1 month before the hearing. Garrett went through the rest. 12 photographs total, documenting a relationship between Margot Kincaid and the judge who had taken Nora away from him. Not just professional, not just friendly. These were photos of people who knew each other well, who met regularly, who had the kind of rapport that suggested influence and favors and deals made in back rooms. At the bottom of the envelope was a note in his father's handwriting. Private investigator took these over 6 months. Porter and Margot have been connected for years. He owes her money. Borrowed it to cover gambling debts. She owns him. That is why you lost Nora. The fix was in from the start. Garrett sat back against the wall. Photographs spread around him. The truth in 12 images. He had not lost his daughter because he was a bad father. He had not lost her because the evidence was against him. He had lost her because Margot Kincaid owned the judge who decided the case. The fix was in from the start. He gathered the photographs carefully, put them back in the envelope, added them to the growing collection of evidence he had found. Then he pulled out his phone and found the number for Victoria Ashford, the lawyer his father had mentioned in the logbook, the one who had been preparing for this moment for years. It was late. But some calls could not wait. She answered on the 3rd ring. "This is Victoria Ashford. My name is Garrett Hollis. I believe you knew my father." A pause, then a breath that sounded almost like relief. "I have been waiting for this call for a long time, Mr. Hollis. I am so sorry about Walter. He was a good man. He left me something. Evidence. A lot of it. I know. We talked about it many times. He wanted to make sure you would have everything you needed when the time came. I think the time has come. Then we have a lot of work to do, Victoria said. Can you come to my office tomorrow? I'm in Pittsburgh, about 2 hours from Millbrook Springs. I will be there. Good. And Garrett, be careful. The Kincaids have eyes everywhere. If they find out what you have found, they will try to stop you. Garrett looked around the captain's quarters, at the logbook on the desk, at the letters from his dead wife, at the photographs of corruption and conspiracy. Let them try, he said. He hung up the phone and sat in silence. Tomorrow he would drive to Pittsburgh, meet with the lawyer, start the process of taking back what had been stolen from him. But tonight he had one more thing to do. He took out the framed photograph of Nora, 4 years old, sitting on his shoulders, laughing at something only she could see. He held it in his hands and made her a promise. I am coming for you, he whispered. I do not care what it takes or how long. I am going to bring you home. The ship creaked around him. Wind whispered through gaps in the hull. Somewhere in the distance, a train sounded its horn. And Garrett Hollis, alone in his father's ship, surrounded by evidence of a decade of injustice, finally allowed himself to hope. Outside the porthole, the first stars of evening began to appear. Tomorrow everything would change. But for now he sat with his memories and his grief and his growing rage, preparing himself for the fight of his life. His father had given him the weapons. Now it was up to Garrett to use them. The drive to Pittsburgh took 2 hours through winding Pennsylvania roads. Garrett left Millbrook Springs before dawn, the evidence from his father's ship secured in a lockbox behind his seat. He had not slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Elise's handwriting. Those final desperate letters to a father-in-law she barely knew, begging him to protect her daughter if something happened to her. Something had happened. And now, 10 years later, Garrett finally understood what. Victoria Ashford's law office occupied the 3rd floor of a brick building in downtown Pittsburgh. Old architecture, brass fixtures, the kind of place that suggested experience and discretion. Garrett parked on the street and sat in his truck for a moment, looking up at the windows. This was it. The moment everything would start moving forward. Or the moment he would discover that even with all this evidence, he was still powerless against people with unlimited money and influence. He grabbed the lockbox and went inside. The receptionist led him to a corner office where Victoria Ashford waited behind a massive oak desk covered in legal files. She was in her 50s with sharp eyes and silver-streaked hair, pulled back in a professional bun. She stood when he entered and extended her hand. Mr. Hollis, thank you for coming. Her handshake was firm, direct. The grip of someone who did not waste time on pleasantries. Please, she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. Show me what you have found. Garrett spent the next 2 hours laying out everything. The logbook, the letters from Elise, the financial records showing bribes to Ruth Brennan and others, the photographs of Margot Kincaid with Judge William Porter. Victoria examined each piece of evidence carefully, making notes, asking questions. Her expression grew more serious with every document she reviewed. When Garrett finished, she sat back in her chair and let out a long breath. "Your father was remarkably thorough," she said. "He spent years building this case, documenting everything, making sure there were no gaps a defense attorney could exploit." "Is it enough?" Garrett asked. "Enough to get Nora back?" Victoria considered the question carefully before answering. "What you have here is sufficient to reopen the custody case. The evidence of bribery and judicial corruption alone would be grounds for appeal. Judge Porter's relationship with Margot Kincaid represents a clear conflict of interest. Any ruling he made should be vacated." She paused. "But there is more here than just a custody dispute. These letters from your wife, the symptoms she described, the timing of her death, combined with what your father documented about Margot's first husband. You think Margot killed Elise. I think there is substantial evidence suggesting that possibility." Victoria leaned forward. "But thinking and proving are two different things. To pursue murder charges, we would need medical evidence, toxicology reports, something that definitively shows your wife was poisoned. Those records would be 10 years old, if they even still exist. Your father believed they did." Victoria pulled a file from her desk. "He mentioned a doctor in his notes, someone who treated Elise in the weeks before her death. He was trying to track down her medical records, but he ran out of time." Garrett felt a familiar weight settling on his chest. So close to the truth and still not close enough. "What do we do now?" "We proceed on 2 tracks," Victoria said. "First, I file motions to reopen the custody case, present the evidence of corruption, get Porter's ruling thrown out. That process will take time, but it is straightforward. And the second track, we keep investigating. Your father left a trail of evidence, but there may be more he did not find, or could not access before he died. I have contacts, investigators, people who know how to dig into things that powerful families would prefer stayed buried." She met his eyes directly. "I should warn you, Garrett. If we pursue this, the Kincaids will fight back. They have money, connections, and if your father was right about Margot, they have already demonstrated a willingness to do whatever it takes to protect themselves. I understand. Do you? Because once we start this, there is no going back. They will know you are coming for them. They will try to stop you, and they will not fight fair." Garrett thought about Nora. 16 years old now, living with a woman who had possibly murdered her own daughter to maintain control over a grandchild. "I have already lost everything once," he said. "I have nothing left to lose." Victoria nodded slowly. "Then let us begin." Garrett drove back to Millbrook Springs with his mind churning. Victoria had given him homework. She wanted him to continue searching the ship for any evidence he might have missed. She wanted him to document everything he found. And she wanted him to be careful. "The Kincaids have eyes everywhere," she had said. "If they learn what you are doing before we are ready, they could destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses, make this whole thing disappear." He pulled into town just as the afternoon light was fading, stopped at Ruth's diner for coffee and a sandwich he did not really taste. Ruth caught his eye from behind the counter but did not approach. too many people around, too many potential witnesses. Back at the ship, Garrett resumed his methodical search. He had already been through the captain's quarters and the galley. Now he worked his way through the rest of the vessel. The crew berthing, the storage lockers, the engine room stripped of its machinery but still full of nooks and crannies where a determined man might hide documents he wanted to keep safe. In a compartment behind a rusted pipe bracket, he found another box. This one contained cassette tapes, old recordings his father had made over the years. Garrett found a battery-powered tape player in the captain's quarters and pressed play on the first tape. Static. Then voices. "Frank, I am calling to give you a courtesy warning." Garrett recognized the voice immediately. Donald Kincaid. Smooth and controlled, the voice of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. "Stay out of this custody matter. It has been decided by the courts. Decided by your wife bribing witnesses and buying judges." That was Walter. Flat and cold. Unafraid. That is a serious accusation. "Do you have any proof I am working on it?" A long pause on the recording. Then Donald spoke again, his tone darker. "You do not want to go down this road, Walter. Margot does not take challenges well. Things happen to people who get in her way. Bad things. I would hate to see anything happen to you. Is that a threat?" "It is a fact. Ask Thomas Barrett. Oh, wait. You cannot. He is dead." The line went dead. Garrett sat back, staring at the tape player. Donald Kincaid had just admitted on tape that Margot was dangerous, that she had been involved in her first husband's death, and he had threatened Walter directly. This was evidence of conspiracy, obstruction, witness intimidation. He played the next tape. More conversations, more threats, more of Donald revealing exactly how much he knew about what his wife had done. By the time Garrett finished listening to all the recordings, the sun had set. He had everything now. Every piece of evidence his father had collected over a decade. Financial records, photographs, audio recordings, witness statements, Elise's own words describing her symptoms and her fear. Enough to bring the Kincaids down. Enough to get Nora back. But as he sat there, in the darkness of his father's ship, Garrett could not shake the feeling that something was still missing. Some final piece of the puzzle that would tie everything together. His phone buzzed. A text message from a number he did not recognize. "Need to talk. Alone. Ruth's Diner. 6 a.m. tomorrow. DK. DK. Donald Kincaid." Garrett stared at the message for a long time. This could be a trap. Could be Donald trying to intimidate him in person. Or worse. But it could also be an opportunity. Donald had sounded conflicted on those tapes. Complicit, yes, but not enthusiastic. More like a man trapped in a situation he could not control, doing what his wife demanded because he was too weak or too afraid to refuse. Maybe after all these years, his conscience was finally catching up to him. Garrett typed a reply. "I will be there." He arrived at the diner before dawn. The streets of Millbrook Springs were empty. A few lights glowed in windows here and there, but most of the town was still asleep. Garrett parked across the street from Ruth's place and watched the door. At exactly 6 o'clock, a car pulled up. Expensive, dark, out of place in this working-class town. Donald Kincaid emerged from the driver's seat. He looked older than Garrett remembered, much older. Gray hair had gone white. His face was gaunt, almost skeletal. He moved slowly, carefully, like a man carrying a weight that was crushing him from the inside. Garrett crossed the street and followed him into the diner. Ruth was behind the counter, already working the early shift. Her eyes widened when she saw Donald, then flicked to Garrett with a look of concern. Garrett gave her a small nod. "I know what I am doing." Donald had taken a booth in the back corner, the same booth where Ruth had said Walter used to sit. Garrett slid into the seat across from him. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Donald looked worse up close. His skin had a yellowish tint. His eyes were sunken, ringed with dark circles. His hands trembled slightly as he wrapped them around a cup of coffee he had not ordered. "You look like your father," Donald finally said. "Same eyes, same stubborn jaw." "So I have been told. Walter was a good man, persistent, honorable. He never gave up even when it would have been easier to walk away." "Is that why you are here?" Garrett asked. "To tell me what a good man my father was?" Donald shook his head slowly. "I am here because I am dying." He said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity or drama. Just a statement of fact. Cancer. Liver. Doctors say I have a few months left. Maybe less. Garrett studied the man across from him. The man who had stood silently while his wife destroyed Garrett's life. The man whose money had paid for bribes and corruption, and possibly covered up murder. Why should I care because I have information? Donald met his eyes. Information you need. And I am tired of carrying it. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick manila envelope, set it on the table between them. "What is that proof?" Donald pushed the envelope toward Garrett. "Bank records showing payments to Judge Porter. Emails between Margot and the judge arranging the custody hearing. Correspondence that proves they were working together to take Nora from you before Elise even died." Garrett did not touch the envelope. Not yet. Why now? After 10 years of silence. After letting your wife get away with everything she has done. Why come forward now? "Because I am dying," Donald repeated. "And because Nora deserves to know the truth about her family. About her mother. About what really happened." What really happened? Donald's hands tightened around his coffee cup. The trembling got worse. Margot killed Elise. The words hung in the air between them. Garrett had suspected it, had seen the evidence pointing to it, but hearing it spoken aloud by someone who knew for certain was different. How arsenic? Donald's voice was barely above a whisper. Small doses over several weeks. Enough to make her sick, but not enough to raise immediate suspicion. The symptoms looked like 100 different things. Fatigue, nausea, confusion. By the time anyone might have figured it out, she was dead. You knew. Garrett's voice was flat, hard. You knew and you said nothing. I suspected. For a long time I only suspected. But I did not want to believe it. Elise was her daughter. Mothers do not kill their own children. He looked down at the table. But Margot is not like other mothers. She is not like other people. How did you find out for certain? After Elise died, I found Margot's computer unlocked. She had been researching poisons, symptoms, lethal doses, how long different substances take to kill. I confronted her about it. What did she say? Donald's face twisted with something that might have been pain or might have been shame. She said Elise was planning to leave, to take Nora and move away. Cut us out completely. Start a new life with you away from Philadelphia, away from her family's money and influence. Margot could not allow that. She said it was necessary. Necessary. Garrett felt the word like a physical blow. She called it necessary, like murder was just another task on a list, another problem to be solved. Why did you not go to the police? Garrett asked. You had evidence. You knew what she had done. Why stay silent because she is my wife? Because I was afraid. Because she knows things about me that would destroy what is left of my life. Donald's voice cracked. I have done things, Garrett. Business dealings that were not exactly legal. Tax evasion. Money moved through accounts that should not exist. Margot knows all of it. She made sure to know all of it, so that if I ever tried to leave or talk or do anything she did not want me to do, she could destroy me. So you stayed quiet, became her accomplice, helped her steal Nora from me. Yes, Donald did not try to defend himself. I helped her. I paid the bribes. I stood by while she took your daughter. I became complicit in all of it. He looked up at Garrett with eyes full of tears. I am not asking for forgiveness. I do not deserve it. But I am asking you to understand why I am here now. I am dying. And I do not want to die knowing I let my granddaughter stay with a monster. Garrett stared at him for a long moment. You will testify in court. Everything you just told me. Yes. Donald nodded. I will give depositions. Sign affidavits. Whatever your lawyers need. I will destroy my own reputation if it means stopping Margot. Why should I trust you after everything you have done? Because I am Nora's grandfather. Donald's voice broke, and I failed her once. I will not fail her again. He pushed the envelope closer to Garrett. Take it. It is everything I have. Bank records, emails, her research on poisons from our home computer. I copied it all before she could delete it, use it, bring Margot down, save Nora. Garrett finally reached out and took the envelope, felt the weight of it in his hands. What about you? When this comes out, I will go to prison, probably. For the financial crimes, at least. Maybe as an accessory to other things. Donald shrugged. I am dying anyway. What does it matter where I spend my last months? He stood up slowly, painfully, like every movement cost him something he could not afford to lose. Tell Nora I am sorry. Tell her I loved her, even if I did not show it the right way. He walked out of the diner without looking back. Garrett sat there for a long time staring at the envelope, at the evidence Donald had given him, at the confession of a dying man who had finally found the courage to do the right thing. Ruth appeared at his table with fresh coffee. Was that who I think it was, Donald Kincaid? He just confessed to being an accessory to murder and gave me everything I need to prove it. Ruth sat down across from him. What happens now? How I call my lawyer. And then we end this. Garrett pulled out his phone and dialed Victoria Ashford. It was early, but she answered immediately. What is it? I just met with Donald Kincaid. He confessed to all of it. Margot poisoning Elise, the cover-up, everything. He heard Victoria's sharp intake of breath. Where is he now? Gone. He drove away after giving me a stack of documents, bank records, emails, evidence that Margot researched poisons before Elise died. This is huge, Garrett. This changes everything. With Donald's testimony, we can pursue murder charges, not just corruption, actual murder. He said he would testify. Sign whatever you need. I'm calling the state attorney's office today. This is enough for an arrest warrant. They will move fast, probably within 24 hours. And Nora, I will make sure the authorities do a welfare check. Get her to safety before they arrest Margot. Whatever it takes, Garrett said. After the call ended, he sat in the quiet diner feeling something he had not felt in years, hope. It was fragile, uncertain, but real. He was going to get his daughter back. Margot Kincaid was going to pay for what she had done. The call came 8 hours later. Garrett was back at the ship photographing documents when Victoria's number appeared on his phone. He answered immediately. We have a problem, she said without preamble. What is it? Donald Kincaid is dead. The words hit Garrett like a fist to the chest. What? How? Car accident. Single vehicle. His car went off a bridge about 20 miles from Millbrook Springs. Happened around midnight. Police are calling it an accident. He was driving too fast. Lost control. Garrett sat down heavily on the deck. That is not an accident. No, Victoria agreed. The timing is too suspicious. He meets with you, confesses everything, agrees to testify against his wife. 8 hours later, he is dead. Margot. That is my thought as well. But proving it is another matter. She could have arranged it any number of ways, tampered with his brakes, hired someone to run him off the road, or simply pushed him psychologically until he was distracted enough to make a fatal mistake. His confession dies with him now. Yes. Victoria's voice was heavy. Donald's testimony was going to be our strongest weapon. He was willing to say under oath that Margot murdered Elise. Without him, we still have the evidence, the documents, the recordings. But it is circumstantial. A good defense lawyer will tear it apart. So what do? We move forward with what we have. The state attorney is still interested. Judicial corruption is enough to proceed with. But the murder case against Margot just got a lot weaker. She paused. I am sorry, Garrett. I know this is not what you wanted to hear. Garrett stood up, paced the deck. The sun was setting over the fields, casting long shadows across the rusted hull. There has to be something else. My father said everything was in this ship. Maybe there is more I have not found yet. It is possible. Walter was thorough. He may have hidden backup evidence somewhere. I will keep looking. Do that. And Garrett, watch your back. If Margot was willing to kill Donald to keep him quiet, she will not hesitate to come after you, too. Let her try, Garrett said. But even as he spoke, he felt the weight of what they were up against. Donald had tried to do the right thing, and it had killed him. The next morning, Garrett returned to the library in Millbrook Springs. He had searched the ship from top to bottom, found everything his father had hidden. But Victoria was right. They needed more. Something that would definitively prove Margot had murdered Elise. The library was small, one room with shelves of books and a few computer terminals. The librarian was an elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson who remembered Walter well. He used to come in here for hours, she said, researching things on the microfilm machine, taking notes, always very polite, very focused. What was he researching? Old newspapers mostly, going back decades. He seemed particularly interested in obituaries and accident reports. She showed Garrett it to the microfilm machine and left him alone. He spent hours scrolling through archived issues of local and regional newspapers, looking for anything connected to the Kincaid family, to Margot, to her past. And then he found it. A small article from 1985. Just a few paragraphs buried in the back pages of a Philadelphia newspaper. Local businessman Thomas Barrett died yesterday following a fall at his home. Barrett, 45, was found at the bottom of a staircase by his wife, Margot Barrett. Police ruled the death accidental. Barrett is survived by his wife and no children. Thomas Barrett, Margot's first husband. Garrett kept searching, found more articles, pieced together a picture of a man who had been wealthy, successful, married to a younger woman who stood to inherit everything if something happened to him. The police report from the incident mentioned a neighbor who heard arguing earlier that evening. But that neighbor was never interviewed at the inquest, never questioned about what she had heard. Margot had inherited approximately $2 million from Thomas Barrett's estate. 5 years later, she married Donald Kincaid. The pattern was clear. Thomas dies in an accident. Margot inherits, marries again into money. And when her own daughter threatens to take away the control Margot valued more than anything else in the world, Elise dies too. Garrett photographed every article, made copies of everything. Then he found something else, a more recent piece from just 3 years ago. Local journalist Gary Hutchins, who had been working on an investigative piece about prominent families in the greater Philadelphia area, was reported missing last week. Hutchins' car was found abandoned on Route 322. His apartment showed no signs of forced entry. Friends say he had been excited about a story he was working on, but had not shared details. Police have no leads in the case. Gary Hutchins, a journalist who had been digging into wealthy families, who had disappeared without a trace, whose story was never finished. Another person who had gotten too close to the truth about Margot Kincaid. Garrett left the library as it was closing, his mind racing with everything he had found. That evening he called Victoria and shared what he had discovered. "This establishes a pattern," she said. "Thomas Barrett, Elise, possibly this journalist. 3 people connected to Margot who died or disappeared under suspicious circumstances. But it is still circumstantial. Yes. Without hard evidence of how Elise was killed, we cannot prove murder. We need medical records, toxicology reports, something scientific that shows she was poisoned. Those records would be 10 years old, if they even exist anymore. Your father believed they did. He was trying to track down a doctor who treated Elise, someone who might have kept records that were not part of the official file. Do you have a name, Dr. Patricia Caldwell? She was a toxicologist at a hospital in Philadelphia. Your father mentioned her in his notes, but he died before he could make contact. I will find her. Be careful," Victoria said. "The Kincaids are going to realize soon that you are investigating them, if they do not already know." Garrett thought about the warning note he had found in the ship, the cigarette smell that someone had left behind. "I think they already do. Then watch yourself. I do not want to get another call telling me you drove off a bridge." After hanging up, Garrett sat in the captain's quarters surrounded by his father's evidence. He thought about Donald Kincaid, the fear in the man's eyes as he confessed, the relief at finally unburdening himself of secrets he had carried for years. Dead now, silenced, just like Thomas Barrett, just like Elise, just like anyone who had ever threatened Margot Kincaid's control. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Victoria's number. "What is it?" More bad news. There was something wrong in Victoria's voice, something tight and urgent. "I just spoke with the state attorney's office. They sent police to the Kincaid residence with a warrant, and the house is empty. Margot and Nora left yesterday afternoon. No one knows where they went." Garrett felt his blood go cold. She ran. It looks that way. Margot must have realized what was happening. Maybe Donald warned her before he died. Maybe she has someone inside the investigation. Either way, she is in the wind. And she took Nora with her. Amber Alert. Being issued as we speak. She is wanted for kidnapping now in addition to the other charges we are building. Nora is with her. Garrett's voice was barely above a whisper. "My daughter is alone with a murderer. The authorities are doing everything they can. Every law enforcement agency in 3 states is looking for them. That is not good enough." Garrett stood up and started gathering his things. "What are you doing?" Victoria asked. "Finding them myself." "Garrett, you cannot just—" "Ruth Brennan told me Margot visits a small town in Pennsylvania 3 or 4 times a year. A place called Grayfield. She has a friend there. Someone she has known for years. You think that is where she went? I think it is the only lead I have. And I am not going to sit here waiting while my daughter is out there with that woman." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "I cannot stop you," she finally said. "But please, be smart about this. Do not do anything that will jeopardize the case or get yourself killed. I will call you when I find them." Garrett hung up the phone and headed for his truck. The drive to Grayfield would take 4 hours. 4 hours of darkness and empty roads and a mind filled with terrible possibilities. But at the end of that drive, if Ruth was right, he would find his daughter. He would find Nora. And he would bring her home. The night swallowed the road ahead of him, headlights cutting through darkness, mile markers flashing past. Garrett drove with both hands gripping the wheel, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the endless stretch of asphalt unfolding before him. Somewhere out there, Margot Kincaid was running, and she had taken Nora with her. Not just running from the law, running from the truth. Garrett thought about everything he had learned over the past few days. His father's decade of secret investigation, Elise's desperate letters, Donald's confession, the pattern of deaths and disappearances that surrounded Margot like a shadow. This woman had killed her first husband, had murdered her own daughter, had destroyed Garrett's life and stolen his child without a moment's hesitation. And now she was cornered. Cornered animals were dangerous. He pressed harder on the accelerator. The miles disappeared beneath his wheels. Towns came and went. Gas stations glowing in the darkness. Truck stops with lonely neon signs. The occasional flash of taillights from a car heading the opposite direction. Garrett did not stop, did not rest. He had waited 10 years for this moment. He would not wait a single minute longer. Somewhere around 3 a.m, his phone buzzed. A text from Ruth. "Be careful. I heard things tonight. People asking about you in town. People who do not belong here. Margot's people. Coming to tie up loose ends." Garrett typed a quick reply. "Watch yourself. Do not talk to anyone." Then he turned his attention back to the road. Grayfield was still 2 hours away. 2 hours until he found his daughter. 2 hours until this nightmare finally ended. He gripped the wheel tighter and drove on into the darkness. Grayfield appeared out of the darkness just as the first gray light of dawn touched the horizon. The town was even smaller than Millbrook Springs. One main street barely half a mile long. A handful of buildings clustered together like survivors of some forgotten disaster. A gas station with 2 pumps and a hand-painted sign. A general store with dark windows. A church with a steeple that leaned slightly to the left. Population 900 according to the faded sign at the town limits. Garrett pulled his truck to the side of the road and sat there for a moment. Engine idling, watching the empty street. Nothing moved. No lights in any windows, just the soft whisper of wind through bare tree branches and the distant call of a bird greeting the coming day. He had driven through the night without stopping. 4 hours of darkness and empty roads, and a mind filled with terrible possibilities. Now he was here. Somewhere in this tiny speck of a town, his daughter was waiting. If Ruth was right, if Margot had really come here, if he was not already too late. Garrett killed the engine and stepped out into the cold morning air. The gas station was the only place showing any sign of life. A light burned in the window of the small building attached to the pumps. Garrett walked toward it, his boots crunching on gravel, his breath forming small clouds in the chill. Inside, an old man sat behind a counter reading a newspaper. He looked up when Garrett entered, his eyes narrow with the automatic suspicion. "Small towns reserved for strangers. Help you." "Looking for someone," Garrett said. "A woman named Margot Kincaid. She might have arrived yesterday with a teenage girl." The old man's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, or maybe fear. Do not know anyone by that name. He looked back down at his newspaper. Conversation over. Garrett stood there for a moment studying the man, the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the paper. Just a little too tightly. He was lying. "Please," Garrett said. "The girl is my daughter. She was taken from me. The woman she is with is dangerous. Cannot help you, mister. Do not know what you are talking about." Garrett wanted to reach across the counter and shake the truth out of him, but that would not help anything. Would only confirm whatever story Margot had told these people about the dangerous man who might come looking for her. He turned and walked back outside. The sun was higher now, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. A few more lights had come on in buildings along the main street. The town was waking up. Garrett climbed back into his truck and started driving slowly through the streets. He was looking for anything out of place, any sign that someone wealthy and out of town had recently arrived. In a place this small, a stranger would stand out. An expensive car would be noticed. People would talk, unless they had been paid not to, or threatened. He circled the town twice, drove down side streets and back roads, past small houses with neat yards, past a school with an empty playground, past fields that stretched away to distant tree lines. Nothing. Then, on his third pass down a residential street at the edge of town, he saw it. A black Mercedes, new model, Pennsylvania plates, parked behind a small white house at the end of a dead-end road. His heart slammed against his ribs. Garrett pulled his truck over a block away and sat there watching the house. It was modest, single story. White paint, blue shutters. A neat garden that someone tended with care. Nothing about it suggested wealth or secrets. But that Mercedes did not belong here. He pulled out his phone and called Victoria. "I found them," he said when she answered. "Grayfield. Small white house at the end of Maple Street. The car is here. Do not approach." Victoria said immediately, "I am calling the state police right now. They can have officers there within the hour." "An hour is too long." Garrett, listened to me. "Margot is dangerous. If you confront her alone, she could hurt Nora. She could hurt you. Wait for backup. What if she runs again? What if she sees me and takes off before the police get here? Then we track her down again. But at least you will be alive. At least Nora will not be caught in the middle of a confrontation." Garrett stared at the house, at the Mercedes parked behind it, at the windows where his daughter might be looking out at this very moment. 1 hour, he said. If the police are not here in 1 hour, I am going in. Fair enough? Stay out of sight. Do not let her know you are there. He hung up and settled in to wait. The minutes crawled past like wounded animals. Garrett watched the house, watched the windows for any sign of movement, watched the door for any indication that someone might be leaving. Nothing happened. The sun rose higher. The town around him came fully awake. A woman walked past with a dog. A pickup truck drove by the driver, giving Garrett a curious look. An old man emerged from a house down the street and started raking leaves in his front yard. Normal life continuing as if everything was ordinary. as if there was not a murderer hiding in that white house. 45 minutes and the front door opened. Garrett sat up straighter, his heart racing. A woman emerged, mid-60s. Gray hair pulled back. Not Margot, someone else. She walked to the mailbox at the end of the driveway, collected some letters, and went back inside. The friend Ruth had mentioned. The person Margot visited 3 or 4 times a year. Another 10 minutes passed. Then Garrett saw movement in one of the windows. A face looking out. Young, female, dark hair. Nora. His daughter was in that house. Alive. Close enough that he could almost reach out and touch her. The face disappeared from the window. Garrett gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went white. 55 minutes since he had called Victoria. Where were the police? At the 60-minute mark, he made a decision. He got out of the truck and walked toward the house. The driveway was gravel crunching under his boots with each step. The Mercedes sat silent and gleaming in the morning light. Up close, he could see mud splattered on the wheel wells. Margot had driven fast to get here. Driven through back roads to avoid detection. Running scared. He walked past the car and up to the front door. For a moment, he just stood there, hand raised, heart pounding. Then he knocked. Footsteps inside. A pause. The sound of someone looking through the peephole. The door opened a crack. The woman he had seen earlier peered out at him. Linda, if Ruth's information was correct. "Can I help you? My name is Garrett Hollis. I am looking for my daughter Nora. I believe she is here with Margot Kincaid." The woman's face went pale. "I do not know what you are talking about. Please." Garrett kept his voice calm. Reasonable. "I know Margot is here. I saw the car. I saw Nora in the window. There is a warrant for Margot's arrest. Police are on their way right now. I think you should leave." She started to close the door. "There is a warrant for kidnapping." Garrett continued. "And for murder. Margot killed her first husband. She killed her own daughter, my wife. She has been running from the law, and she brought my child here." Linda's hand froze on the door. "Murder, yes." Garrett met her eyes. "Whatever Margot told you, whatever story she gave you about why she needed to hide it, was a lie. She is dangerous, and my daughter is not safe with her." Linda stood there for a long moment. He could see the conflict on her face, the uncertainty, the fear. "Wait here," she finally said. She closed the door. Garrett stood on the porch, barely breathing. Inside, he could hear muffled voices, sharp words exchanged, movement. Then the door opened again, and Margot Kincaid stepped out. She looked exactly as Garrett remembered. Poised, elegant, silver hair perfectly styled, expensive clothes that seemed out of place in this modest small town, cold eyes that assessed him the way a predator assesses potential prey. But there was something different now, something around the edges. Desperation. "Hello, Garrett," she said. "It has been a long time. Where is Nora?" "She is safe. She is upstairs, unaware of this dramatic scene you are causing. Dramatic, Garrett felt the anger building in his chest, but forced himself to stay calm. You kidnapped her. You ran from the police. There is a warrant for your arrest, for murder. Yes, Linda mentioned it. Margot's voice was cool, almost amused. How enterprising of you, finding your father's little treasure trove of lies and half-truths. Walter always was better at documentation than actual parenting. He was protecting me, protecting Nora. From what? From a grandmother who loves her, who raised her, who gave her stability and opportunity and everything she needed to thrive. From the woman who murdered her mother. Margot's expression did not change. If you are expecting me to break down and confess, you will be disappointed. I did what was necessary. Elise was weak, unstable. She was planning to take Nora away and raise her in poverty with a father who could barely support himself. I gave Nora the life she deserved. By killing Elise, by removing an obstacle. Margot said it without flinching. Elise would have destroyed that child's future out of some misguided idea of independence. I prevented that. Garrett stared at her. This woman, this monster, speaking about murder like it was a business decision, like ending her own daughter's life was just another problem to be solved. You are insane. I am pragmatic. There is a difference. Margot folded her arms. Now, unless you have police with you, which I notice you do not, I suggest you leave. Nora is happy. She is safe. She does not need a father who abandoned her 10 years ago showing up to disrupt her life. I did not abandon her. You took her from me. Semantics. The result is the same. She does not remember you. She does not want you. You are a stranger to her. Then let her tell me that herself. No. Why Garrett took a step closer. If you are so sure she does not want me, what are you afraid of? I am not afraid of anything. I am simply protecting Nora from unnecessary trauma. Let me talk to her. 5 minutes. Absolutely not. Then I will call the police right now. They will surround this house, arrest you. Take Nora into protective custody. Is that what you want? Margot's eyes narrowed. You are bluffing. If you were going to call the police, you would have done it already. She was right. Garrett had not called them because he wanted to see Nora first, wanted to explain things himself before law enforcement got involved. Maybe that was a mistake. He pulled out his phone. Wait. Margot held up a hand. Let us be rational. You want to see Nora. I want to protect her. Perhaps we can reach an arrangement. What kind of arrangement you leave? Go back to whatever life you have built. I will take Nora somewhere safe. Somewhere you and the police will not find us. In a few years, when she is an adult, she can decide for herself whether to contact you. You are offering to let me give up my daughter in exchange for you not getting arrested. I am offering you a chance to avoid traumatizing Nora with the truth about what I did. Do you really want her to know I killed her mother, that her grandmother is a murderer? That knowledge will destroy her. She deserves the truth. The truth will hurt her. Ignorance will protect her. You do not get to make that choice. I already did. 10 years ago. And I will keep making it. Garrett pressed dial on his phone. Then I guess we are done talking. Margot's composure cracked. Just slightly. Just for a moment. Garrett, do not. A voice called from inside the house. Grandma. What is going on? And Nora appeared in the doorway behind Margot. Garrett's world stopped. She was 16 now, tall and slim, dark hair like her mother, blue eyes like him. She wore jeans and an oversized sweater and looked tired and confused and absolutely beautiful. His daughter, his little girl, standing right there in front of him. Sir, the emergency dispatcher's voice came through the phone. Are you there? What is your emergency? Garrett could not take his eyes off Nora. I am at 247 Maple Street in Grayfield, Pennsylvania, he said. I need police here immediately. Margot Kincaid is here. There is an active warrant for her arrest. Margot's face went white. Nora, go upstairs. What is happening? Nora looked between them. Who is that man? Nobody important. Just go upstairs, please. Police are on their way, the dispatcher said. Stay on the line. Nora did not move. She stared at Garrett with those blue eyes. His eyes. And he saw something flicker in her expression. Recognition. I know you, she said slowly. From pictures. I am your father, Garrett said. His voice broke on the last word. I am your father, Nora. Her expression shifted. Confusion, disbelief, shock. No. You are. Grandma said you were dead. I know what she told you. But I am here. I am alive. I have been looking for you for 10 years. That is not. Nora turned to Margot. You said he died when I was little. You said I said what was necessary to protect you. Margot's voice was firm. This man abandoned you. I gave you a home, a life. Everything you have is because of me. You lied to me. Nora's voice rose. For 10 years you lied to me. I protected you from a painful truth. What truth, Emma? Nora's voice cracked. That my father was alive and you kept him from me. That your father was unfit. That he could not care for you properly. That you were better off without him. Garrett stepped forward. Just one step. Nora, your grandmother is lying. She took you from me through fraud and bribery. I never abandoned you. I fought to keep you. And she made sure I lost. Why should I believe you? Nora's eyes glistened with tears. I do not even know you. I know. And I am sorry for that. But I can prove everything I am saying. Your grandfather, Donald, he confessed before he died. He told me what Margot did. Nora's face crumpled. Grandpa is dead. Garrett's heart broke at the pain in her voice. I am sorry. It was an accident. Margot cut in quickly. When Nora demanded, 2 days ago. Nora turned to Margot, eyes blazing now. Not just confused, angry. You did not tell me Grandpa died, and you did not tell me I was protecting you from grief. We had to leave quickly. Stop lying to me. Nora's voice cracked. Just stop. Please. In the distance, sirens wailed, getting closer. Margot's composure finally broke completely. Nora, listen to me. We need to leave. Right now. Before the police get here. Leave. Why? Because they are going to arrest me. They are going to take you away from me, and they are going to tell you things. Terrible things about me that are not true. What things? Lies. All lies. Margot reached for Nora's arm. Garrett has convinced them I did something to your mother, that I hurt Elise, but I loved her. I loved her, and I love you, and I have only ever tried to protect you both. Nora pulled away from her grandmother's grasp. She looked at Garrett. Is that true? Did she hurt my mom? Garrett wanted to say yes, wanted to tell her everything right then and there. But he saw the fear on her face, the confusion, the fragility of this moment. If he pushed too hard, he might lose her forever. I have evidence, he said carefully. Evidence that your mother's death was not an accident. But this is not the time or place to talk about it. The police are coming. They will help sort everything out. I do not understand any of this. Nora wrapped her arms around herself. This morning I woke up and everything was normal. Now Grandpa is dead and Grandma is being arrested and my father is apparently alive and She could not finish. Garrett took another step toward her. Nora, I know you are scared. I know this is confusing. But I promise you, I will explain everything. I will answer every question you have. I just need you to trust me. Just a little. Just enough to let the police do their job. Why should I trust you? You are a stranger. Because I am your father. And I have spent 10 years trying to find you. The sirens were louder now. Flashing lights appeared at the end of the street. Margot looked at the approaching police cars, at Nora, at Garrett. For a moment, he thought she might run, try to grab Nora and flee out the back door. But where would she go? She was surrounded now. No escape. This is a mistake, she said. A terrible misunderstanding. You can explain that at the station, Garrett said. The police cars pulled up. Officers emerged with weapons drawn. Margot Kincaid, one of them, called. We have a warrant for your arrest. Margot straightened her spine, lifted her chin. Even now, facing the end of everything, she held onto her dignity like a shield. She looked at Nora one last time. Remember that I love you. Whatever they tell you, whatever lies they spread, remember that everything I did was for you. Then she walked forward with her hands raised and let the officers handcuff her. Nora watched in silence, tears streaming down her face, her whole world crumbling around her. Garrett wanted to go to her, to hold her, to tell her it would be okay. But he was still a stranger. She would pull away if he tried. So he just stood there, waiting, giving her space. An officer approached him. "You are Garrett Hollis." "Yes. We are going to need you to come to the station. Give a statement." "I understand." The girl, too. Garrett nodded. He turned to Nora. "Nora, would it be okay if I rode with you? Just to make sure you are not alone through this." She stared at him for a long moment. This man she did not know. This stranger who claimed to be her father. Then slowly she nodded. It was not forgiveness. It was not trust. But it was a start. The police station was small. A few rooms in a holding area. They put Margot in a cell and took Nora and Garrett to separate interview rooms. Garrett gave his statement first. Everything from finding the ship to the evidence his father had collected to Donald's confession. The detective listened, took notes, asked questions. When Garrett finished, the detective leaned back in his chair. "This is quite a story, Mr. Hollis. It is the truth. I believe you. The evidence you have provided, combined with what the state attorney already sent us, gives us enough to hold Mrs. Kincaid pending trial. Multiple charges. Kidnapping. Fraud. Corruption of a public official. And we are working with Pennsylvania authorities on potential murder charges related to your wife's death. What about Nora?" The detective's expression softened. "That is more complicated. You have not had custody in 10 years. We cannot just hand her over without proper legal procedures. She would need to be placed with social services temporarily." "No." Garrett leaned forward. "She has been through enough. Do not put her in foster care with strangers. I understand your concern, but there are rules. What if I could get emergency custody right now, tonight? My lawyer can file papers. That would still take time, days at least." The door to the interview room opened. Nora stood in the doorway, an officer behind her. "In the meantime," she said, "I will stay with him." Everyone turned to look at her. She was pale, her eyes red from crying, but her voice was steady. "I gave my statement. They said I might have to go to foster care. But I do not want that." She looked at Garrett. "If he is really my father, I want to stay with him. At least until this gets sorted out." The detective looked uncomfortable. "Miss Kincaid Hollis." Nora interrupted. "My name is Nora Hollis." Garrett felt his chest tighten at hearing her say his name. "Miss Hollis," the detective corrected. "I understand this is difficult, but we have procedures. I am 16 years old enough to have a say in where I go. And I am saying I want to stay with my father." She looked at Garrett again. "If that is okay with you." "Of course it is." Garrett's voice was rough, more than okay. The detective sighed, made a phone call, consulted with someone. Finally, he came back. "All right. Given the unusual circumstances and Miss Hollis's age and preferences, we can place her with you temporarily. But you will need to stay local until this is resolved. No leaving the state. Check in with us daily." "We can do that," Garrett said. "There is a motel a few blocks from here. I suggest you get a room. The state attorney will want to meet with both of you tomorrow." They left the station together. Nora walked a few feet away from Garrett's arms wrapped around herself. The morning had given way to afternoon. and the small town was fully awake now. People going about their business, looking at the strangers who had brought so much drama to their quiet community. "Are you hungry?" Garrett asked. "We could get food. I do not know. Maybe. There is a diner across the street." They sat in a booth. Neither of them touched the menus. Nora stared at the table. Garrett watched her, still hardly believing she was here. His daughter, after 10 years. "I do not know what to say to you," Nora finally said. "I do not know how to do this. Neither do I," Garrett admitted. "But maybe we can figure it out together. Did you really fight for me 10 years ago? Yes. I showed up to every court date, every supervised visit. I tried everything I could think of. But your grandmother had money and lawyers, and she had paid people to lie about me. I could not win." "Why did you stop trying?" Garrett was quiet for a moment. This was the question he had been dreading, the one he did not have a good answer for. "Because every time I saw you, you cried when I had to leave. Because the visits were hurting you more than helping. Because I was broken and did not know how to fight anymore." He paused. "That is not an excuse. I should have been stronger. Should have found another way. I am sorry." Nora was quiet for a long time. "She told me you did not want me, that you had moved on, started a new life, forgot about me." "I never forgot. Not for one day. Not for 1 hour. Do you have proof of what she did to my mom?" "Yes. Medical records, toxicology reports, witness statements. Your mother was poisoned with arsenic. She knew what was happening at the end, and she tried to protect you." Nora's eyes filled with tears. "I do not remember her. I was so little when she died. Grandma said she was sick, that it was natural, that no one could have prevented it. She was sick because Margot was poisoning her. Your mother figured it out. But she died before she could go to the police. Why would Grandma kill her own daughter because your mom was planning to take you away? To move somewhere Margot could not control you both. Margot could not allow that. So she murdered her." Nora said it flatly, like she was testing the words, seeing how they felt. "My grandmother murdered my mother. To keep me." "Yes." Nora put her face in her hands, and then she sobbed. Not quiet tears, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. The grief of a child who had just learned that everything she believed was a lie. That the woman who raised her was a monster. That her mother had died trying to save her. Garrett moved to sit beside her, put his arm around her shoulders. She did not pull away. They sat like that for a long time, father and daughter, reunited after 10 years, holding each other in a diner in a town neither of them had ever heard of until today. When Nora finally stopped crying, she pulled away slightly, wiped her eyes. "I want to see the evidence. All of it. I need to understand what happened." "Are you sure?" "I am sure. She has been lying to me my whole life. I want to know the truth." "Okay. Tomorrow. I will show you everything. Tomorrow." They got a room at the motel. 2 beds. Threadbare but clean. Nora took the bed by the window, curled up with her back to him. Garrett lay awake for hours, listening to her breathe, hardly believing she was here. After 10 years of grief and loss and fighting, his daughter was here. They had a long road ahead, trust to rebuild, trauma to heal, a lifetime of absence to somehow bridge. But they had time now. They had a chance. That was more than Garrett had dared to hope for in years. He closed his eyes and slept better than he had in a decade. 3 days later, Victoria called with news. "We found it," she said. "The medical evidence we needed." Garrett was at the ship with Nora, showing her the captain's quarters, the logbook, the letters her mother had written. "What did you find?" "Your father's notes mentioned a safety deposit box, number 247 at First National Bank in Millerton. We got a court order to open it." "What was inside?" "Medical records, toxicology reports, everything we needed." Victoria's voice was almost triumphant. "A doctor named Patricia Caldwell ran tests on your wife's blood after she died. Found arsenic levels over 100 times the normal amount. She sent the results to the medical examiner, but someone made them disappear. The case was closed as natural causes before anyone reviewed the toxicology. Someone was paid off. That is what it looks like. But Dr. Caldwell kept her own copies. Your father tracked her down, convinced her to put the records in that safety deposit box. Just in case." Garrett leaned against the desk, felt the weight of a decade finally lifting from his shoulders. "So we have proof, scientific proof, irrefutable, combined with everything else, Donald's recorded confession, the financial records, the photographs of Margot with Judge Porter. We have more than enough to convict her. What happens now? The state attorney files formal murder charges. Margot Kincaid will stand trial for the murder of Elise Hollis and for the suspicious death of Thomas Barrett. They are reopening that case too." She looked at Garrett through the phone. "You did it. You and your father. You brought her down." Garrett looked at Nora, standing by the porthole, looking out at the fields. "We are not done yet," he said, "but we are getting there." The trial took 3 months. Margot Kincaid sat at the defense table every day. Expensive lawyers, tailored suits, the same cold composure she had always worn. But the evidence was overwhelming. Medical records proving Elise had been poisoned. Financial records proving the bribes. Audio recordings of Donald confessing everything before his death. Photographs documenting Margot's relationship with the corrupt judge. Witness testimony from Ruth Brennan about how she had been paid to lie. One by one, the pieces of Walter Hollis's decade-long investigation were presented to the jury. And one by one, Margot's defenses crumbled. Nora attended every day of the trial. She sat beside Garrett in the gallery, listening, learning, understanding the full scope of what her grandmother had done. It was hard for her. Some days, she came out of the courtroom pale and shaking. Some nights, she cried herself to sleep. But she kept coming back. "I need to know," she told Garrett. "All of it. I need to understand." On the last day of the trial, the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Murder in the first degree for the death of Elise Hollis. murder in the second degree for the death of Thomas Barrett, kidnapping, fraud, corruption, conspiracy. When the verdict was read, Margot Kincaid did not react, just sat there, still and cold, like a statue carved from ice. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the bailiffs led her away, she looked at Nora one last time. "I love you," she said. "Everything I did was for you." Nora looked at her grandmother, this woman who had shaped her entire life, who had killed her mother, who had stolen her from her father, who had built a world of lies and called it love. She did not respond. She just took Garrett's hand and walked out of the courtroom. They drove back to Millbrook Springs that afternoon. Garrett had rented a small house on the edge of town. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with mismatched appliances, a porch where they could sit in the evenings and watch the sun go down. Nothing fancy, but it was theirs. Over the following weeks, they settled into a routine. Nora enrolled in the local high school, made friends, started to build a life that was her own. Garrett went back to work. Odd jobs at first, then more steady employment as word spread that he was reliable and skilled. On weekends, they worked on the ship together. Garrett taught Nora how to use the tools in his red toolbox, how to sand rust from metal, how to seal leaks and repair rotting wood, how to bring something broken back to life. They talked while they worked. Nora asked questions about her mother, about her grandfather Walter, about the years Garrett had spent searching for her. Garrett answered everything honestly, even the hard parts, even the things that made him look weak or foolish or broken. She deserved the truth, all of it. One evening, as they sat on the deck watching the sunset paint the fields gold and orange, Nora leaned her head against Garrett's shoulder. "Tell me about her," she said. "About Mom." Garrett was quiet for a moment, gathering memories he had not allowed himself to visit in years. She was brave, he said, braver than she knew. She grew up with a mother who controlled everything, who told her what to think and feel and want. But she broke free. She chose her own life, her own path. And when she realized what was happening to her at the end, she did everything she could to protect you. He put his arm around his daughter. "She would be so proud of you, Nora. The way you handled all of this, the strength you showed." Nora was quiet for a long time. "Do you think she knows that we found each other?" Garrett looked up at the sky, at the first stars beginning to appear. "I think she knows." They sat there until the night grew cold. Then they climbed down from the ship and walked back to the house together. On the last page of Walter Hollis's logbook, Garrett wrote a final entry. "Dad, I found everything. I found the truth. Nora is home now, safe, with me. You spent 10 years building a case that I did not even know existed, fighting a battle I thought I had lost. And in the end, you gave me everything I needed to win. I'm sorry I doubted you. Sorry I spent so many years thinking you did not care. I understand now. You showed your love the only way you knew how, through action, through persistence, through never giving up even when it seemed hopeless. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be that kind of father to Nora, the kind who fights, the kind who never stops, the kind who leaves behind everything his child needs to find their way home. Thank you for the ship. Thank you for the evidence. Thank you for believing in me, even when I did not believe in myself. Rest now. You have earned it. Your son, Garrett. He closed the logbook and set it back on the desk. Through the porthole, he could see Nora on the deck, looking out at the fields, the wind in her dark hair. His daughter. Home at last. Garrett walked out to join her. The sun was setting. Another day ending. Another day of this new life they were building together. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Nora was quiet for a moment. "I was thinking about Grandpa Walter, about how he never gave up, even when it seemed impossible, even when no one knew what he was doing." She looked at Garrett. "That is what you did too. You came here. You found the evidence. You kept fighting even when everyone told you it was hopeless." "I almost gave up," Garrett admitted, "more than once. But something kept pulling me forward. Some part of me that refused to accept that this was how the story ended. I am glad you did not give up. So am I." They stood there together as the last light faded from the sky. Father and daughter, reunited after 10 years of separation, bound together now by truth and love, and the legacy of a man who had fought in silence so that they could find their way back to each other. Some wounds never fully heal, but they can close. They can scar over. And with time, with patience, with love, they can become part of your story instead of the end of it. The ship creaked softly around them, wood and metal settling, the sounds of something old learning to rest. Garrett put his arm around Nora. "Come on," he said. "Let us go home." They climbed down from the ship and walked across the field toward the lights of the small house waiting for them. Behind them, the vessel sat in the darkness, silent, patient, keeping watch over the land like a guardian standing eternal vigil. Walter Hollis's final gift, a father's love preserved in rust and wood and secrets, passed down to the next generation, carried forward into the future, where it would never be forgotten.